Not every child grows up. Some vanish. Some are lost. But in 1873, in a cold Montana town buried beneath snow and silence, one child refused to change. No height. No teeth. No aging. Just the same quiet baby face year after year. Doctors left in silence. Priests turned away. Because no one could explain why he never grew older. It started with a cry that never changed. For 50 years, the same sound echoed from the same crib inside a forgotten farmhouse deep in the hills of Montana. No one believed the rumors at first. A baby who never grew? A face that never changed? Just another ghost tale passed down through hushed whispers. But one by one the locals who got too curious disappeared. And those who listened too closely to the cries changed forever. This is not a story about a miracle child. This is a story about something science never dared to touch. Welcome to Behind the Genius, where we uncover the strangest, most disturbing tales history tried to bury. From haunted inventions to unsolvable mysteries, here the impossible becomes undeniable. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what's hiding behind the genius. Now, let's go back to Montana. 1873, and the baby who never aged. In the winter of 1873, the small town of Barlow Creek, Montana, recorded a snowfall so fierce it buried fences, silenced livestock, and forced families to board up their windows for weeks. It was the kind of cold that hollowed your bones, the kind that made old men whisper prayers and mothers rock their children a little longer than usual. That was the winter the baby was found. Sheriff Elijah Greeley was first to arrive. The town's only doctor had ridden out to a nearby village 2 days before and hadn't returned, so when the letter came, scratched in shaky handwriting on damp paper, Elijah went alone. The letter had no signature. Just a message. It hasn't changed. I think it's watching me now. He followed the trail to the outskirts of town, to an old homestead half swallowed by drifts. The chimney was cold. The porch had collapsed. But inside the cellar, hidden beneath a broken trapdoor and a layer of hay, Elijah found it. A baby. Swaddled in moth-eaten blankets. Silent. Still. Its skin was pale as wax. Its eyes wide open, clear blue, unblinking. It didn't cry. It didn't flinch. It simply stared at him like it had been expecting someone. And beside it, a rotting journal. Elijah took both. Back in town, the baby became a curiosity. A mystery. And quickly a quiet terror. Because it never changed. Days passed. Then weeks. It never cried, never aged, never slept. It only stared. The townsfolk whispered behind closed doors. Some said it was cursed. Others said it wasn't a baby at all. But Elijah, who kept it in the guest room of his cabin, began having dreams. Always the same. A cradle rocking by itself. A voice, soft and distant, whispering numbers backwards. And a frost creeping across his windows from the inside. He stopped sleeping. The journal, too, was strange. Its pages were brittle, stained. Only a few were legible, filled with entries like these. I tried to leave it in the woods. It came back. I nailed the cellar shut. It cried without sound. It does not eat. It does not sleep. It remembers things I have not told it. It speaks, but not aloud. After 2 weeks, Elijah visited Father Mallory at the church. The priest was a quiet man who'd seen his share of horror during the war. But when he looked at the baby, he stepped back. "That's no child," he muttered. "That's something waiting." He tried to bless the room. The crucifix on the wall snapped in half. Elijah locked the baby in the room. But that night, he awoke to find it sitting at the foot of his bed, still wrapped, still silent. The door had not been opened. By the 3rd week, Elijah wrote to the state capitol requesting help. He received no reply. The telegraph wires snapped during the storm. Roads were buried. They were alone. Then came the second journal. It appeared on the baby's lap, identical to the first, but dated 20 years earlier. Its entries were in another hand. "We found it during the snowstorm of '53. My sister kept it alive, or so we thought. But she stopped aging. She looks like the baby now. I don't know which of them is which anymore." That was when Elijah started keeping his own notes. He wrote down every minute, every change, every breath. But there were no changes. One day he closed the journal and said aloud, "You're not real." The baby blinked. It was the first movement he'd seen. He shouted for the priest, for neighbors. But when they came, the baby was exactly as before. So quiet. That night, the town's clock tower stopped at 3:13 a.m. Every dog in the village howled once. Then silence. The next morning, Elijah was found outside his home, barefoot, frostbitten, mumbling the same words again and again. It's learning. It's remembering me now. He was taken to the church infirmary. But the baby remained. And a third journal appeared. More would come. And not one page would ever age. A week after Elijah was taken to the infirmary, the baby still hadn't moved. It sat upright on the small wooden chair where he'd last placed it, eyes wide open, head slightly tilted, as if listening. No one dared touch it. The townspeople began crossing the street to avoid Elijah's home. Curtains stayed drawn. Conversations halted when the wind carried too close to that house. But someone had to care for it. They sent Clara Bell. Clara was 17, orphaned and quiet. She worked at the church, sweeping aisles and folding hymn sheets. When Father Mallory asked her to sit with the child each afternoon, she didn't ask why. She simply nodded. The first time she entered the cabin, she nearly turned back. The air was thick and still, heavy like a closed tomb. The moment she stepped into the nursery, her breath fogged unnaturally. Yet the fireplace was still glowing. The baby sat by the window, its eyes fixed on the trees. Clara sat in the rocking chair across the room. "Hello," she whispered. It blinked. Not fast. Not slow. Just once. That blink was enough to freeze her bones. But she stayed. She stayed because something in her, some deeply buried instinct, told her running would make things worse. For the first few days she only observed. It never moved again. It never spoke. But it watched. Always. Heard the door, the shadows on the walls. On the 6th day she noticed something different. A photograph had appeared on the floor beneath the baby's chair. It was old, sepia-toned, the kind that left smudges on your fingers. It showed a woman in a long dress standing beside a cradle. Her face was blurred as if smeared from inside the picture. On the back was a name written in tight script. Margaret Bell, 1853. Clara's blood ran cold. That was her mother's name. She had never seen a picture of her. Her mother had died giving birth. At least that's what the town records claimed. Clara brought the photo to Father Mallory. His hands trembled as he turned it over. "This child," he whispered, "it's not bound by time." That night Clara dreamed of the cradle. Only this time she was in it, staring up at herself. The next morning another journal appeared. Not on the baby's lap this time, but on Clara's bed. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was hers. She flipped to the final page. It was dated 1 week in the future. The entry read, "I am beginning to forget which of us is real," she screamed. Father Mallory came running. When he saw the journal he tried to burn it. But just like Elijah's, it would not burn. It turned black in the flames, then reappeared hours later on the church pew beside Clara. More photographs followed. Each from different eras. Each showing the same child, unchanged. Posed beside strangers. Sometimes held. Sometimes lurking in the background. One photo, cracked and blurry, showed a family from 1912. Another, clearly marked 1821, had the child peeking out from behind a curtain. The baby hadn't aged. Not 1 year. Not one wrinkle. The clothes changed. The settings changed. But the child remained the same. Whispers started in town again. Some said it was a punishment from God. Others thought it was the devil himself hiding in a child's form. But Clara started to believe something worse. That the baby wasn't from the past or the present. It was outside time. And it was looking for something. One afternoon she found her own name written in the corner of the nursery window, etched in frost. She hadn't written it. She touched the letters. Her fingers burned. Behind her the cradle creaked. When she turned the baby was standing. Its eyes were now a milky gray. Its mouth opened, not to cry but to whisper. Not in English. Not in any language Clara had heard before. But she understood it all the same. And it said, "She gave me to you." Clara collapsed. When she awoke the photograph was gone. And in its place on the windowsill was a lock of her own hair. As the strange frost grew thicker on the nursery windows, a man rode into Barlow Creek, wrapped in a heavy black coat and carrying a satchel full of bones. His name was Malcolm Rook, a wandering mortician. Not officially invited but drawn by whispers, bad weather and worse omens. He claimed he followed the smell of rot, not the sweet decay of death, but the sharp metallic stench of something that shouldn't be alive. He arrived just as the snow began to fall again, slow and unnatural, flakes shaped like tiny sharp teeth. Clara saw him at the edge of the churchyard talking to no one. Just standing there, staring toward Elijah's old home. She didn't trust him, but Father Mallory said, "If the devil sends a man, he must have something to fear." Malcolm asked one question. "Has it blinked?" Clara nodded. Malcolm said nothing more. He simply took off his gloves, opened his satchel and laid out 3 tools: a mirror, a feather and a key carved from bone. He went to the house alone. What happened next came only from his account, though the town would later confirm parts of it. He entered the nursery. He didn't speak to the baby. He simply held the mirror up to its face. It didn't reflect. Then he took the feather and touched it to the child's lips. No breath. But the room shook. Just slightly. Just enough to knock the key to the floor. Malcolm turned to leave. But the baby was gone. In its place stood a boy, maybe 7 years old, wearing the same moth-eaten blanket. He looked straight at Malcolm and whispered, "Too soon." Malcolm left the house screaming. He said he saw its death. But not the end of it. He saw it curled up beneath the roots of a tree hundreds of years old, with dozens of small hands stretching out from beneath the dirt. He saw it burning in a town that hadn't been built yet. He saw it speaking to a woman with no eyes. And he saw a mirror, cracked, endless, where the child aged backward every time someone looked at it. He fled the town that night. And in the morning Clara found his satchel. Inside was a new journal. Its last entry: "It can only be born where it has already died." Later that week, the town's river froze solid in a single hour. Every clock in Barlow Creek reversed by 5 minutes. And the baby returned to its chair, smiling. The first child to hear the baby speak was Thomas Weaver, a 6-year-old who lived 2 houses down from Elijah's cabin. He was a quiet boy, often lost in thought, often seen building small stick figures in the snow. His mother sent him with soup for Clara one evening just before dusk. She watched him walk up the path. She watched him knock. She never saw him leave. By the time the sheriff arrived, Clara was already searching the woods. The soup bowl sat untouched on the porch, steam still rising. The nursery door was ajar. The baby sat in its chair, smiling. They found Thomas 2 hours later, standing knee-deep in the frozen creek, eyes wide, whispering to no one. His lips were blue but his voice was clear. "It's not a baby," he kept saying. "It's not new. It's just wearing small skin." The town held its breath. After Thomas, more children reported dreams. They described the baby in great detail, down to the stitching on its blanket, the color of its eyes, the strange symbols burned into its cradle. But none of them had ever been inside Elijah's house. One child, Maria Jensen, drew a picture of the baby in school. It showed the child's face, twisted, older, as if stretched thin over bone, and behind it dozens of other faces looking out of its eyes. Her teacher fainted at the sight. Father Mallory collected every drawing, every journal, and locked them away in the church cellar. But the damage was done. The children were no longer themselves. Some stopped speaking entirely. Others began using words their parents had never taught them, strange old-sounding phrases like "the cold mother" or "the first silence." Whatever it was, the baby had started talking. Not to adults. Only to children. And only in dreams. Clara, growing thinner by the day, confessed to Father Mallory that she too had heard it speak now. But unlike the others, she wasn't asleep. She said she'd heard it say her name. Clearly. Repeatedly. While it stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Each time it said her name, the reflection grew darker, until she no longer saw herself, but something crawling just behind her. Something small, white-eyed and grinning. The priest tried to exorcise the house. 3 candles went out at once. The crucifix bent backwards. And the floorboards bled. Literally. A red, viscous fluid oozed between the cracks. When he bent to touch it, he heard a heartbeat, beneath the floor. They sealed the nursery and nailed the door shut. But every night, the sound of rocking echoed through the town. Even those blocks away heard it. Creak, pause, creak, pause. And then the windows began to frost with messages. Not just "let me grow," but full phrases. "I remember the fire." "Why did you stop praying?" "I can make more." Some villagers left. Others tried to bless their homes with salt and scripture. But one by one they began to dream too. In the dreams the baby always waited. Sometimes at a desk. Sometimes behind a locked door. Sometimes floating in a cradle in the middle of the woods, beneath a sky with no stars. But always watching. And always speaking without moving its lips. The school shut down after 3 children collapsed during morning prayers. They spoke in unison upon waking. "She's almost ready." Clara grew distant. She began writing symbols into her journal, symbols no one could read. She spoke to no one except the baby. When asked about her health, she only replied, "It's teaching me." Father Mallory found her one morning in the snow, barefoot, holding the old photograph of her mother. The picture had changed. Her mother was gone. In her place stood the baby. He carried her inside. She didn't resist. But her hands were ice cold and her pulse beat slow, like it belonged to someone who'd never been born. The priest wrote to a monastery in the mountains, begging for help. But the letter never left town. The messenger vanished. His horse returned with empty eyes. And now even the adults began to hear it speak. In whispers. In echoes. In dreams not their own. They said Elijah Greeley would never speak again. After he was found barefoot in the snow, mumbling about the baby, he hadn't said a full sentence in months. He simply sat in the infirmary staring at the frost-covered window, sometimes blinking, sometimes not. But in the first week of spring, a season no one believed would come, he whispered one word. Door. Father Mallory rushed to him. Elijah, what door? The sheriff didn't blink. He just stared ahead, murmuring again. The door's opening. The same day, cracks began to form in the walls of Elijah's old home. Not outside but inside. Hairline fractures that slithered along the wallpaper like veins. Clara saw them first. The nursery door had been nailed shut. Now the nails were gone. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. The door swung open on its own. The baby was gone. In its place stood something else. A shape hunched in the shadows, just tall enough to scrape the top of the doorframe. Clara backed away slowly, but the thing didn't move. Then she heard it breathing. Not the baby's breath. Something deeper. Heavier. As if the house itself had taken a breath. The cradle began to rock again. Only this time there was no child in it. And the walls pulsed. Like lungs. That night, Clara returned with Father Mallory and 3 townsmen. They carried lanterns, crosses, and salt. They descended into the basement beneath the nursery, where Elijah had first found the baby months ago. But now the crawlspace had changed. It was bigger. Deeper. The wood had warped, stretching into unnatural angles. And carved into the beams were more of those ancient symbols, each one glowing faintly as they stepped closer. At the far end, a tunnel had appeared. It hadn't been there before. It pulsed with warm air, and from within it came a sound like a lullaby, soft, distant, and in a language none of them could name. One man, Jonah Briggs, turned and fled. He was found the next morning in the churchyard, eyes gouged out, with the word, Mother, carved into his chest. The rest returned to the surface. Father Mallory declared the house unholy. He asked Clara, "Do you know what it wants?" She shook her head. But that night in her dreams she did. It wanted out. The changes came fast. Too fast. The door frames twisted. The windows refused to open. Anyone who entered for too long began to hear crying, not of a baby but of 1,000 children, all weeping in harmony. Photographs in town began to shift. Old family portraits now showed the child. Not once but over and over, sitting on laps, hiding in corners, floating just above the heads of the living. Father Mallory kept burning them. But new ones kept appearing. Then came the frost. It spread not from outside in but inside out. The air grew heavy. Every mirror cracked. Every Bible warped. And in every hearth the fire died. Clara no longer slept. She kept her journal close. Each night she woke with new words in her head. Not English. Not Latin. But clear in meaning. She began writing them across her walls. She didn't eat. Didn't blink. When Father Mallory confronted her, she said only, "I'm not hers yet. But I'm close." She revealed the truth. The baby had been passed down. From town to town. From mother to daughter. But she wasn't just next. She was the last. The last one who could carry it forward. The child never aged because its body wasn't meant to. It was meant to be worn. Like skin. Like memory. One final storm came. Not of snow. But of silence. The town fell quiet. No birds. No footsteps. Just stillness. And then came the sound. A single cry. Not a baby's cry. But Clara's. She was found on the nursery floor, cradling something wrapped in white. It had her eyes. But not her face. Behind her, the old cradle burned with blue fire. And carved into the wall behind them. The first breath is taken. The last dream begins. Days passed, but the townsfolk would not enter Clara's house. Not even the bravest. Something about the air around it had changed. It felt heavier, thinner, like stepping into the eye of a storm that hadn't started yet. Inside, Clara sat perfectly still in the nursery. She no longer spoke. Not in words. Not with her mouth. But the townspeople heard her anyway. In dreams. In the backs of mirrors. In the ringing inside their ears when they stepped too close to the house. Father Mallory finally dared return. The frost had now engraved itself deep into the windows, not as random ice but in full sentences. One line repeated across all four corners of the house. The veil is thinnest where the name is forgotten. He didn't know what it meant. But when he entered the nursery he saw it. The mirror, once cracked now whole, clean, bright, reflecting not what stood before it, but what had once stood, what would stand again. Inside the mirror were names, etched in spirals, endless names, thousands of them. And at the center one was missing. Clara's. He reached for it. But as he did, the mirror pulsed. Behind him, Clara finally spoke. "You can't take it back." Then she smiled. That night, no one in Barlow Creek slept without dreaming the same dream. A single road covered in ash. A black sky. A house at the center, glowing blue from within. And the baby. But it wasn't a baby anymore. It was a figure wrapped in cloth, floating above the floor, dragging a cradle behind it. From within the cradle came a sound no one could describe, not crying, not laughter. Something between the two. In the dream they all walked toward it. All of them. Parents, children, the dead and the unborn. All moving forward. The next morning, 5 townspeople were gone. Vanished. Their boots were still outside their beds. Their front doors were wide open. Their pillows remained warm. Clara's house pulsed. Father Mallory gathered the remaining townsfolk in the chapel. They brought family heirlooms, old photographs, birth records, anything that could anchor them to the present. He believed if the creature fed on memory, then memory must be weaponized. The chapel echoed with prayers and weeping. They lit candles in a circle. In the center they placed the only thing that hadn't changed, Elijah Greeley's sheriff's badge. When Clara entered, uninvited, the flames turned blue. She looked younger now. Younger than ever. Not like a woman. Not like a girl. Like something about to be born. "I remember all of you," she whispered. And so does she. With a flick of her hand, the candles died. The room chilled. Every photograph in the church blackened. The only thing that remained clear was the cradle, which had somehow appeared behind the altar. And it was empty. The next day it snowed. In July. But it wasn't snow. It was ash. And beneath it the town shifted. Trees swayed in directions opposite the wind. People spoke, and their words echoed before their mouths moved. Time was unraveling. Those who tried to flee found themselves back at their doorstep. A man aged 30 years in an hour. A child regressed to infancy and vanished. Father Mallory, desperate, broke into Elijah's cabin and returned to the crawlspace beneath the nursery. It was gone. Now, in its place, a vast pit stretched downward, pulsing with blue fire and filled with the sound of thousands of lullabies, each in a different tongue. From within it rose the child. And from within the child, a voice not its own. "The dreamer must forget. So I can remember." Clara returned to the nursery one last time. She climbed into the cradle. No one knows who saw it or if it was just a story passed down, but they say the house sighed, long and loud, like a mother letting go of a breath. The windows shattered. The frost vanished. And when the townspeople dared enter again, there was nothing left but the cradle. Empty. The mirror was gone. The journals were blank. And Clara's name had returned to the records. Born 1855. Died unknown. Only one note remained, carved into the nursery wall. The baby never aged, because it was never born. Only remembered. After the house collapsed and the girl vanished into the woods, the town seemed to sleep under a dull gray sky. No sun. No moon. Just a dim, colorless haze that settled over every rooftop and church bell. Children didn't cry. Dogs didn't bark. It was as if sound itself had grown tired. The townsfolk pretended things were normal. They reopened the school. Lit candles in church. Wrote letters they never intended to send. But everyone knew, the baby wasn't gone. It was simply waiting. Then, on the first frost of summer, the white cradle returned. It appeared in the center of the town square. No one saw it placed there and no one heard it come. One moment the square was empty. The next, it stood in the middle of the cobblestones, perfectly clean, carved from bone-white wood, and rocking gently in the windless air. Inside it was no child. Only a folded piece of paper. Sheriff Boone, long since broken in mind and faith, approached it with trembling hands. He bent over, lifted the note, and read aloud. "She left me. You did not." That evening, strange music filled the air, low, dissonant lullabies that drifted in and out of hearing, like a radio signal from far away. People locked their doors and covered their windows, but the sound seeped in anyway. It wasn't loud. But it was inside everything, clocks, drawers, hollow floorboards. And with the music came the faces. First in puddles. Then in mirrors. Then in dreams, the baby still smiling, still wearing that same expressionless joy. But now it was always flanked by others, dozens of versions of itself, each slightly altered. One taller, one thinner, one wearing spectacles, one with no eyes at all. It wasn't one child anymore. It was many. It had multiplied. Clara's journal reappeared too, found by the Reverend's door, wrapped in her old shawl. The final entry was not dated. It simply read, "When the cradle returns, so does the memory. Do not look at it. Do not name it. Do not feed it. But someone always does." By the third night, young Jacob Perry had vanished from his bed. His mother found frost on his pillow and small footprints leading to the barn. Inside, in the hay, lay a second white cradle, identical to the first, though older, cracked as if passed down through generations. It rocked on its own, empty. But the moment she turned away, it cried. No one in Barlow Creek slept that night. The church bell rang 13 times at midnight. No one was inside the bell tower. And across town, every door opened at once. Not slammed. Not creaked. But as if something was passing through. No one saw what it was. But everyone heard it breathing. The wind carried it. The fire mimicked it. The soil itself seemed to inhale, and with each pulse the air turned colder. By morning, the townspeople found 7 cradles arranged in a perfect circle around the town square. Each one different. Each one rocking. Each one lined with the same threadbare blanket, stitched with initials no one recognized. And written across the town's water tower, in frost that refused to melt, "It will never stop being born." Barlow Creek emptied that day. Those who could fled south. Some went mad before they crossed the county line. Others were never seen again. But a few, like Father Mallory, stayed. He locked himself in the church and lit every candle. He prayed until his throat bled. He played hymns from dawn to dusk. But the sound of lullabies never left. And one night a knock came at the church door. Not loud. Just 3 slow taps. Low on the wood just above the floor. Like a child's hand. He did not open it. But the next morning he found a note slipped beneath the door, written in his own handwriting. "You held me once. You gave me breath. You are still mine." That night, the cradle on the altar rocked by itself. And a soft voice whispered from the rafters, "Feed me my name." Mallory was never seen again. No one knows how many cradles now sit in Barlow Creek. The town is gone from maps. The road that leads there has collapsed. Locals tell hikers to stay clear of the forest edge, not because of wolves but because of songs that echo after dark. The baby who never aged didn't vanish. It simply spread. And wherever it goes, the first sign is always the same. A white cradle. Rocking in silence. Waiting. They thought it ended with Clara. When she vanished into the fog with the last cradle, barefoot, silent, no goodbye, it was assumed the horror of Barlow Creek had concluded. That maybe, just maybe, the evil had been buried beneath ice and ash, tucked away in the bones of a town no longer found on any map. People spoke of her as a martyr. Others believed she'd simply gone mad. And for a while the world moved on. Seasons passed. Forests grew. Time, as it always does, forgot the edges of the strange. But not this one. Because the thing inside that cradle, the thing that smiled without blinking, did not fade. It waited. And with time it learned. The change came slowly, almost politely. It started in distant places. Not Montana. Not Barlow Creek. Not even the valley near the Hollow House. The first signs were scattered. A woman in Kansas awoke from a dream of a child she didn't have. A child with teeth too small and eyes too large. A fisherman in Oregon found a cradle drifting along the riverbank, carved from bone-white wood, its rockers smooth as marble. He touched it only once. Within days he forgot the names of his children, but remembered a lullaby in a language he never knew. A librarian in Illinois received a returned book with no title, filled entirely with charcoal sketches of infants, hundreds of them, each with Clara's eyes. No one connected these events at first. How could they? There were no headlines. No public panic. Just strange murmurs scattered across small towns and cold cities. But something was threading them together, something quiet and methodical. A consciousness without form. A memory not born but built. And then the names returned. Claire. Elijah. Boone. Mallory. Names thought erased from the world resurfaced in impossible places. Etched in frost on windows. Scribbled into the margins of church hymnals. Muttered by toddlers who had never been taught them. A child in Alabama, no older than 4, looked into her grandmother's eyes one morning and whispered, "The preacher burned the wrong prayer." When asked what she meant, she said, "Ask Clara." She had never heard of Clara. Her parents swore they'd never been west of Missouri. Around the same time, cradles began appearing, not in homes but in empty fields, abandoned barns and forest clearings. Always white. Always rocking. Always empty. They were found on hillsides beneath thunderclouds. In abandoned attics. In burned-out buildings where nothing else survived. And each cradle, no matter how isolated, was warm to the touch. Some who dared to approach said they heard a heartbeat. Others claimed the wood sighed when touched, as if relieved. As if waiting. In remote parts of Montana, search parties vanished. Not all of them, just those who wandered too far into old trails marked with strange runes. Their radios would cut out, their compasses spin. They'd disappear into the timber, and their last transmissions were always the same. It's here again. One searcher returned alone, barefoot, speaking in riddles about a cradle filled with feathers and a child who bled milk. He clawed at his own mouth until his tongue was gone and never spoke again. The medical report claimed frostbite and psychosis. But the doctor who signed it hung himself 3 days later, leaving behind only a single phrase etched into his window pane: "She gave it my voice." The most terrifying change wasn't the cradles or the dreams or the names. It was the songs. Low and slow they would play from nowhere. A distant humming. A melody woven into wind. People reported hearing lullabies in their sleep, only to find they'd hummed them aloud into their pillows. Old phonographs would crackle to life, playing tunes that never existed. Some swore they could hear a baby crying beneath the static of untuned radios. The songs never had lyrics. Only emotion. A sadness so ancient it felt sacred. A hunger wrapped in comfort. A sound that made your body tense, your eyes water, your hands shake. As if you were remembering a nightmare you'd never had. The lullabies didn't want to be heard. They wanted to be shared. And the more they spread, the more people remembered what they were never supposed to know. They remembered the child. Not as a face but as a presence. An idea. A concept given warmth. It was no longer confined to a single town. It had outgrown Barlow Creek. It had slipped from that frozen cradle and into the space between dreams, between prayers, between breaths. It did not crawl or walk, it existed. In thought. In silence. In old stories whispered beneath quilts by grandmothers who didn't understand why they knew the tale. A field researcher in the Dakotas discovered a stone circle littered with tiny teeth. They were perfectly preserved. Baby teeth. 47 of them arranged in a spiral. At its center, a single white rattle wrapped in dried umbilical cord. The symbols etched onto the stone had only one translation: "It is remembering you." In California, a schoolteacher wrote an entire chalkboard full of strange script before collapsing. When translated, the phrase repeated: "Rock the cradle. Feed the name. Breathe the skin." No one understood it. But a cradle appeared in her living room that night. Her family swore it hadn't been there when they locked the house. One night in Toronto, a baby monitor picked up a signal no other device recognized: a slow rhythmic breathing, then the sound of a child's voice asking, "Do you remember when I was born?" The couple had no children. They moved out the next day. But the cradle remained. It never collected dust. By now, churches had begun to change their hymns. Old verses were removed. Choirs silenced certain notes. A bishop in Vermont began preaching about the unborn God, claiming he had been left behind, swaddled in forgetfulness. He was dismissed. His sermons burned. But his congregation swore the church never felt empty again. In fact, it felt watched. The fog that once consumed Barlow Creek spread further each year. Not real fog, but the veil of forgetting, the kind of spiritual frost that made places go quiet. Entire hamlets were consumed. Homes boarded up. Nurseries sealed. Families stopped naming children after the old names. And those who did, well, those children aged strangely. Too fast. Or not at all. And always they smiled too soon. Too perfectly. Like they already knew something. And then came the final sign. A cradle in Times Square. Just once. Just for 13 seconds. 5 people saw it. 3 disappeared that week. The other 2 were committed. When asked what they saw, one only whispered, "The smile doesn't blink." The other screamed, "Don't sing to it. It wakes when it hears the old song." The world tried to ignore the signs. Governments dismissed them. Scientists called them mass psychosis. But in the shadow of forgotten towns, beneath cracked church bells and sealed attic doors, the thing that once was cradled had grown into something else. It was no longer just a child. It was a memory given form. A thought too heavy for the human mind to carry. A dream that didn't end. A thing that could only be described in hushes and shivers. It did not belong to this world, but now it wore it like skin. and it had learned how to be born. Not from wombs, but from remembrance. If you remembered the name, you invited it. If you dreamed of the lullaby, you became part of it. If you saw the cradle, it was already too late. Clara's final journal resurfaced in a locked trunk found buried in a monastery garden 600 miles from Montana. Her last written words were clear, desperate, etched in blood. It doesn't need a mother anymore. It just needs a story. Because stories last longer than flesh. And this child, this memory, would never stop being told. Not by choice, but by need. By those who saw it. By those who hummed it. By those who dared to ask, who rocks the cradle now? And if you're hearing this, if you've watched until the end, you already know the answer. So, if you ever see a white cradle where there shouldn't be one, if you hear a lullaby that doesn't belong to your childhood, and if you feel like something, or someone, is waiting for you in the silence, you haven't lost your mind. You've just been remembered. This was the story of the baby who never aged. But what if I told you, it wasn't a story at all? If this left a chill in your spine or a question in your heart, then hit that subscribe button. Because behind the genius isn't just about science, it's about the secrets it refuses to touch. Candle, like, share, and comment if you've ever dreamed something you weren't supposed to. Brain, and if you think this tale was terrifying, you haven't seen what's coming next. Because we're only just beginning to tell the stories that never died. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and whatever you do, don't pick up the cradle.